In the first reading of Parshas Chaye, which presumably deals with the postmortem after Sarah Rabeinu's passing, even though it's called Chaye, the life of Sarah, we hear about Sarah's burial, the preparations for Sarah's burial. Avraham Avinu comes to Hebron and he begins the negotiation process, and he informs the local people that one way or the other, this funeral is going to be happening, the burial will be taking place, and in the end, Avraham Avinu pays an exorbitant amount of money, and he acquires the field of Machpelah. In the second reading of Parshas Chaye, which begins chapter 24, verse 17, the Torah says, after Avraham Avinu paid top dollar and purchased the field, the Torah says, "Vayokom sdei Efrein asher b'Machpelah." So this field, it was elevated, it rose. Asher lifnei Mamre, this was before the area of Mamre. Hasoda, the field, Bahamaora, and the cave, Asher bai, V'chol ha'etz asher basoda. All of the trees that were on this field. Asher b'chol gvuloi saviv, everything that was in its borders, all around, all of this rose. That's the Torah's terminology, it rose. So what does that mean when it says that Yokam's the Ephron? What does it mean when it says the field rose? So Rashi says that the reason that the Torah specifically utilizes such unusual verbiage, it rose. It rose. It was bought. It's acquired. That's how this should start. It now became his property. No, we say Vayokam. So Rashi says that the terminology indicates Tekuma Haisaloi. That this is not just property. This is not just an acquisition. This is not just a transfer of real estate or a sale. But Tekuma, that some kind of elevation happened to this property. Sheyotza miad hedyet. It went from the hands of a commoner, liad melech, to the hands of a royal. And Avraham Avinu, who was viewed by the local people as being a royal. Having said this, Rashi says, Upshuta shel mikra, the simple way of understanding the word Vayokom is a terminology of Kinyan. Vayokom hasada v'hamora asher boi, the field and the cave and all the trees, etc., rose lavrav lemikna, becoming Avraham Avinu's acquisition. So yeah, Vayokom does mean acquisition, but Rashi cannot simply gloss over the word Vayokom and say, yeah, Vayokom means acquisition, because really that's not the typical word that's used to describe acquisition. What's the typical word for acquisition? Kinyan. Means to buy, acquire, not Vayokom, not rose. So the fact that we emphasize the idea of rising has to have a different kind of meaning to it. And the Rebbe once explained this in a very beautiful way. He said, when you have a property which was owned, let's say a heritage property, and then somebody comes along and buys the property, it doesn't lose its original name. I don't know, like a McDonald house or whatever. So whoever bought it afterwards bought it. They technically have the keys. They technically own it. But that's the house where so-and-so used to live. That's the heritage house. Who owns the heritage house now? So it doesn't lose its original description. It's just technically somebody else has the ownership. Somebody else has the rights to it. But it remains, if you will, residually whatever it was known as before. But there's one difference, and that's if a king buys it. If it's acquired by a royal estate, so the royal estate by far will trump and overwhelm whatever was there before. So regardless of what was called before, once like the king owns it, now it's known as the king's residuals. When Avraham Avinu, it wasn't, that's Ephron's field, then now Avraham is owning. Never again. Now it's Maras Machpelah. Now it's the Jewish cemetery area, the piece of property that was owned by Avraham Avinu. So that's the meaning of Vayokom. This was not simply an exchange, this was a transformation, if you will. Very interestingly, the Radak, who's also, of course, a Pashtan, also deals with Pshat. He says that Avram indeed acquired it, but it was Kam la'Avram le'mikveh. It rose up. It rose up. What does it mean, it rose up? So the Radak seems to be alluding to the Medrash Rabbah that says that the typography shifted, that the actual typography of the area where this Ephron was, it actually lifted up, so that it should be separate, nikar, distinct from all of the other fields. And when you go to Hebron, you see that Maras Machpelah is on an incline. can't, it's not, there's lowlands all around, and all of a sudden you have to go up steps to go there. So the Medrash indicates that after Avraham Avinu bought it, there was some kind of transformative or seismic event in which the field actually rose. And the people saw this. And it was very compelling to them. And they knew that this was Avraham Lemikne. Continuing now in verse 18, this was for Avraham, an acquisition. Le'enib neches. Everybody saw this. And maybe that Medrash gives us a different idea of what they saw and how this was viewed. B'chol boi sha'arire, for all of those who might come or go through the city gates. And then the Torah says, B'chol boi sha'arire, all those coming through the gates. Rashi says this means mikerev kulam. This was done very publicly, amidst everybody. Uvemaimit kulam, and in the presence of everybody. Kulam hiknohulai. They all, so to speak, they allowed him to acquire it. What does this mean? Of course, it means that Avraham Avinu, they understood that Avraham Avinu is now bringing about the actualization of the vision and the dream of Eretz Yisrael. They understood this. They understood. They knew that Avraham Avinu had settled in Hebron. Already in Parshas Lech Lecha, as we discussed, Avraham Avinu had a real address. Avraham Avinu was no longer just a nomad. He said, I'm here to stay. Already last week's Parsha, he establishes a Beit HaKnesset where Vela Bakar Ratz Avram, the Pirkei de Rebbe Lezer tells us in chapter 36 that Avraham Avinu runs after this calf, comes into the cave. There he finds Sarah and Chava and Adam and Chava in repose. And that's where he makes his place for tefillah. So he has not only a home, he has a synagogue too, and he davens there for 25 years. And that's where he knows Sarah Imenu wants to be buried. That's where it's going to happen. So not only did the people know that Avraham is here to stay, and Avraham Avinu is no longer a nomad, and he's not a guest, but now he's seeking out permanent roots. You can always live in one house and move to the next. You can't move cemetery plots. Once you're there, you're here. And so Avraham Avinu sets down these permanent roots, and he engages in what we would call the actualization, the concretization of the vision and the dream. Now it's real. A piece of Canaan is already Eretz Yisrael, and everybody stands and everybody sees and nobody protests, and so the process begins to unfold. And Torah emphasizes this again now in verse 19. Vayokom hasada, second time. In verse 19, after this, Avraham Avinu goes ahead and buries Sarah. Only after this happens. Only after a portion of the land of Canaan has actually become transferred. But not only transferred, transformed. Sarah is not buried in Eretz Canaan. Sarah is buried in Eretz Yisrael. So after a piece of land has become Eretz Yisrael, has become part of our eternal Jewish heritage, covered Avraham Sarah Ishtay. There Avraham buries his wife. El Ma'oras Sdeha Machpelah. In the field of the Machpelah, Al Pnei Mamre, on the field of Mamre. He Hebron, this is Hebron, Be'eretz Canaan, and as we learned earlier in Parshas by Lech Lecha, the emphasis here on Mamre is, the word Mamre comes from the terminology rebellion, and Mamre was the man who rebelled against the idolatrous philosophies and attitudes of his time. And Mamre was like a maverick. He didn't go along to get along. And Avraham Avinu valued that and appreciated that. He said, this is where I want to be. And this is where Eretz Yisrael started. It started in the field, in the area, in the jurisdiction, in the neighborhood of a person who said, I renounce the notion of idolatry and I embrace Avraham and his monotheism. That's where it all started. So covered Avraham as Sarah Ishta, he buries him right in that place in the land, in the city of Hebron, in the land of Canaan. Rashi doesn't say anything, but the question might, of course, be asked: what is the meaning of V'achar Kain covered Avraham? So first of all, the Tiferes Tzvi, based himself on the Medrash, says Avraham Avinu himself buried Sarah. He did not allow the other people to bury Sarah. He says this is the way he demonstrated Chavivas HaMitzvah. It's a mitzvah, burial is a mitzvah, and Avraham Avinu taught us now, when it comes to a mitzvah like this, it's not beyond anybody's dignity. On the contrary, everybody should be involved. If Rahman al-Islam, you have a funeral, then the person is buried not by machines, not by professionals, not by somebody else, but by Bnei Yisrael. You yourself have to be involved, as Avraham himself was involved. That's the way it's supposed to be. This is the first example. This is the first Jewish funeral. Last week we had the first Jewish birth. Now we have the first Jewish funeral. And Avraham Avinu demonstrates very clearly, Kavod Avraham, you have to do this. Now, the Emek Dover says something interesting. He was more of a Litvischer take on things. He says it's a gnai, it's inappropriate for a tzaddik to be buried in a grave that isn't yet purchased. He says Avraham Avinu first has to complete the purchase. Even though there's Nivul Ames and Sarah is there, the body's there, she has to be buried. Yeah, but it has to be done right. So it has to be done right. It means everything has to be negotiated, everything's got to be paid for. And when the actual piece of land is owned by Avram, now it's ready for Sarah Imenu. Now Avram Avinu can perform the burial, and that's the meaning of Acharechein. Verse 20, Vayokom Hasodev Hamaora Asher. The field and the cave. Now we have the third emphasis here on the transfer. And the transfer that it was a Vayokom. And once it became LaAvraham, LaAchuzas Kover, for Avram Avinu, for a burial place, and it's obvious that burial places are not temporary, then Me'ez B'nei Ches, then Avram Avinu is able to, so to speak, complete the process. So the Torah emphasizes, yet again, the concept of Vayokam Sedei Ephraim. The Bechor Shur says, why does it have to be emphasized again? And he says something very interesting. He says, when Avram Avinu bought it, they understood that it belongs to Avram. But he could purchase really any land. And a person could buy plots, and so you have the plot, doesn't mean you use the plot. Only after Sarah Imenu was actually placed in the ground, only then did it become Eretz Yisrael. That's the real Vayakam was when Sarah was buried. When Sarah was in the ground forever, because you don't move. It's not like you don't move houses, you don't move graves. Sarah is in the ground, and then Vayakam Hasada. And this gives us really an appreciation of how the parsha is called Chaye Sarah, the life of Sarah, even though it's about the death of Sarah. And it opens up with the postmortem and the funeral. But what was Sarah Imenu about? Sarah was the one who argued with Avram and says, Yishmael will not inherit. Nobody else owns the land of Israel. Ki'im b'ni, only my son Yitzchak. And when does this start to become actualized? When does the notion of Jewish ownership of the Holy Land of Israel, and especially the city of Hebron, when does it happen? After Sarah Imenu is buried. Now go figure that other people say that the Maras Machpelah is their shrine, right? It's lunacy. It's like total ignorance of history, ignorance of our tradition. It makes no sense whatsoever. It's so clear, it's so obvious that Sarah Imenu, in her passing, in her terrestrial death, Sarah Imenu continues to establish what she always spent her life doing, namely building, developing the nascent nation of Israel. The Chaye has this, he talks about this in legal terminology, and he says that really and truly, it's not so simple that the transfer is affected through consideration. That's only a halacha amongst Bnei Yisrael, but if it's amongst Bnei Noach, maybe the transfer doesn't happen through kesef, and it says Avram paid money, so you had to actually do an active acquisition. So if you're going to farm the land, how would you acquire it? By farming it. If you're going to live there, how would you acquire it? By living in it. And if you bought it for the purpose of burial, how would you really acquire it? With its usage. What was its usage? What was it purchased for? For burial. Says Arachaim. That's the point. It was established as a chuzas kever. Since that's what it was purchased for, it was only after Sarah was buried that it was formally acquired, and now it became a piece of Eretz Yisrael. So to augment everything we said now, here's a beautiful little teaching from the Rebbe, beginning in your Biurim book on page Reish Samach Gimel on the bottom. The Rebbe says, Eretz Yisrael huftecho la'Avraham zman rav lefnei misa Sarah. The land of Israel had been promised many, many years prior to this. Make the calculation. Avraham Avinu came together with Sarah to Eretz Yisrael when she was 90. Now she's 127, so it's 37 years earlier. Almost 4 decades before. That's when the land was promised. As soon as he came to the land, it was promised him already. And then a few months later, it was promised l'cha, to you. And when Hashem said l'cha, after he separated from Lot, because Lot would not inherit the land of Eretz Yisrael, HaKadosh Baruch Hu then gave him specific marching orders. His halech ba'aretz, walk through the land, la'orkba, la'rachba. And as we talked about in our studies of Parshas Lech Lecha, as the Ramban explains, and then the Rabbeinu Bechaya, Arachaim, Shoyim and Achirim talk about this idea of Avraham Avinu actually acquiring the land by walking through the land, by reviewing its boundaries, etc. This was an act of acquisition, and all this was done kedei liknoisa, as we explained. This was all about acquiring Eretz Yisrael. That's nice. But Mikol Makom lehoya zeh ba'ofen gali le'enkel. Avram Avinu knew what he was doing. When he was walking through the land, he was not only, so to speak, creating a space for the future. Not only was he doing something which would be Maaseh Avos, similar Banim, as Ramban says, a sign that the acts of the fathers become a sign for the children. Not only was he, so to speak, scoring the area and enabling it for the future actions, but Avram Avinu was actually acquiring this. But only Avram Avinu knew that. That wasn't necessarily a public declaration. He knew why he's walking. He knew why he's going. He knew why he's living. But it wasn't something that everybody knew. On the contrary, at that time, if you would ask somebody, who really owns this country? Who owns this land? He would say, the Canaan. Because Ba'isai's man at that time, HaKanani af his chazak, the Kanani got stronger. The Kanani was a foreign invader. The Kanani, who's from the children of Cham, the Chamite, came up from Mitzrayim in North Africa, and he established himself in the Middle East, even though that was given to Shem. That was supposed to be for the seed, for the progeny of the Semites. But the Kanani got stronger. The Kanani had invaded earlier. He already lived in Hebron, and then he established himself throughout the land. V'hoya, as Rashi told us in Parshas Lech Lecha, at the time when Avram Avinu came, Hoylech v'kovesh es ha'aretz mizarish al Shem. The Chamites, the Canaanites were at that time conquering the land, and continuing to encroach on the area that was supposed to be designated for the seed of Shem. Dafke l'tzayrich Sarah. But it was specifically for the purposes of Sarah. Ulechvoida, for her honor. It was in Sarah's honor, and you could say by the spirit or force of Sarah's spirit, that Avram Avinu begins to actuate his ownership of the land. And when does that happen? Only in Parshas Chaye Sarah. Kishakona, when he purchases the Ephron Asher Machpelah, when he purchases that field, Hamakayim Harisha in the first place, Sha'avram Rochash Bepeil Ubegolei. This is the place that Avram Avinu openly now establishes as the land of Canaan Le'einei Kol Ha'amim, in a manner which is public, seen by all. The Nepach, and this piece of land, is transformed Mimokem Shel Hedyet, from just commoner's land, Eretz Yisrael. And that's the meaning of Lemelech. The royalty means Eretz Yisrael. And Asiba Lekach, the reason for this, why was it with the force of Sarah's spirit? Why was it only Sarah's passing? We know tzaddikim are greater in their passing than during their lifetime. So what Sarah couldn't accomplish in her terrestrial lifetime, she could accomplish when her terrestrial lifetime came to an end. Because now Sarah is even more powerful. But why is it that Sarah is the one who makes this happen? I mean, Avram goes through the motions. He reads the speech Sarah wrote for him. But Sarah really is the one who makes this happen. So the Rebbe says this speaks to the intrinsic difference between the genders of male and female, which by Torah, those are the genders. Ha'ish mitivei meruchak minihulam hamaisi shel nyane habayis. By nature, the way the Torah sees it, a man is often distant from the practical runnings of family and household. V'davka ha'isha hi ha'isekes b'hem. This is a gift that Hashem placed squarely in the hands of the feminine gender. Hamagshima isa b'maisa, who makes the house into a home and sets the tone for family. Ukedivri Chazal, as the words of our sages, which are understood to be both literal as much as they are metaphoric. Ha'ish mevi chitin. The man goes out to work and sweat in the field, and he brings home wheat. She'enon mechonis la'achila. Nobody can eat wheat. Can't get a pile of wheat on your plate. Doesn't do anything. So once upon a time, when the roles were very clearly defined, everybody knew exactly what they had to do in life. And there were no many options. You get out in the field and you worked, and you had to eat. So the man would bring home the raw materials. And the wife, on the other hand, would make the raw materials, would turn that into something which is edible. V'nimtzeis, as the Gemara says in Maseches Yevamos on page 63, Me'ira Einov, she illuminates his eyes, or Ma'amidasi al-Raglov, she, so to speak, stands him on his feet. Lefizeh, according to this, Yesh Lefarish Gam Lashon Chazal, the Rebbe says there's an incredible statement which is made in the Tanakh Devei Eliyahu in the 9th chapter. And it's often misunderstood. the statement is, Ezehu isha kshera, who is the suitable, who is the appropriate wife? She'oise ritzayin baila. So she does her husband's bidding. So people will say, that's what it means? She does her husband's bidding? The perfect wife is the dutiful wife who just follows what her husband says? No, says the Rebbe. That's not what it means. Oise ritzayin baila doesn't mean she does the will of her husband. She makes the will of her husband. She makes her isha He's got ideas and dreams and visions. She makes it happen. That's the meaning of baila. Otherwise, it would remain in the realm of a desire, a want, a strong vision, if you will, but doesn't happen. It's not actuated. This is also true on a spiritual level. A man by his nature is less tethered to the conventions of everyday natural life. V'dafka ha'isha, it's specifically in the feminine gender, in the role of the woman, ha'mekasheres b'poel esa elakus yeminyane elam, who fuses godliness and spiritual aspiration with the material and everyday, real concrete world. And this is the reason that Avraham Kishal Atzmei Lahikshim is Balusei. Hashem never gave the instruction to Sarah. He never told Sarah, Kumis halach bar, told it to Avram. And what did Avram do about it? Well, he moved into a house. He got himself an address, but he never did anything about it. He never went ahead and purchased the land. And in theory it happened, but not in practice. In the merit of Sarah, it was because of the force of Sarah's spirit that this hat now, Sarah, if you will, by dint of her needing to be buried, forces Avram to act. And now we see a piece of the land of Canaan being transformed before our very eyes. Vayokom Sdei Ephraim, the field of Ephraim is elevated. Sheyotza miad hedyet liad melech. And so, once again, we see how Hebron is ours. Hebron was the first place that Avram and Sarah lived, first place they settled. And Hebron, Ma'aras HaMachpelah, was the first part of Eretz Canaan that was actually purchased by and established as the Jewish and eternal homeland. And this eternal Jewish homeland, which belongs to every single Yid, regardless of what his or her citizenship is, or regardless of where he or she lives, but it's a nachlas olam, it's a legacy, it's a heritage that belongs to every one of us. This all began in the city of Hebron. This is all rooted in Ma'aras HaMachpelah. The Eibishter should help us that the Michei Hebron, those who are sleeping in Hebron, should rise in Eretz Hashem soon with the coming of Mashiach. Then Heira will be Ameinu. Amen.